Has it really been 55 years since Nissan released the Datsun 240Z on an unsuspecting and rapturous world? 7 generations in, we now have the Z, and that remains one of our favourite sports cars. Now, Nissan has let its performance arm Nismo loose on the Z, added about 20k to the price, and gone after the Toyota GR Supra, Ford Mustang V8 and BMW M240i. All three are favourites of ours as well. Is this a dreaming? My name is Byron Mathioudakis for CarsGuide.com.au, and I'm here to find out just that. Nismo, of course, stands for Nissan Motorsport, and it's their performance arm in the same way that AMG is to Mercedes and HSV was to Holden. Which means, of course, that Australians love this sort of thing. Last year, as limited editions, the first 100 Z Nismos sold out in under an hour, according to Nissan. Now it's back more permanently, still from $94,000 before on road costs, but without quite the exclusivity. But don't worry, you still get the Nismo body kit and cabin treatments, stronger performance, and track-focused chassis upgrades, which include extra bracing, sharper steering, beefier suspension, bigger brakes, and GTR spec wider wheels compared to the regular Z. You'll also find Recaro sport seats, Nismo branded digital instrumentation and steering wheel, additional driving modes, and red trim highlights above the regular Z items like an 8-inch touchscreen, Bose audio, active noise cancellation, and climate control. But the Nismo ditches electric seat adjustment and warmers. And there's no spare wheel, just a tyre repair kit. Boo! But yay to the retro design, with its cab backward silhouette, long nose and short wheelbase that somehow manages to deftly capture the spirit of previous Z generations without it looking like a bad mishmash or caricature. As Datsun, Nissan owned the 1970s, and the 240Z was Japan's first breakthrough sports car. In fact, the 240Z was so everywhere that it even appeared on the Bionic Woman. And that really spoke to me. I love the design. So this, as a retro pastiche of 7 generations of Z cars, I think is very successful. Now, Nismo has made a few enhancements to the design, and some of it date back to that 240Z from the 1970s, such as the longer bumper spoiler diffuser situation here, which helps with air intake and aerodynamics and that sort of thing, and high-speed stability. That harks back to the Fairlady ZG for all you nerds out there. Moving along the side, there is the side skirts with the red pinstriping kind of situation. These alloy wheels are specific to the Nismo, and they're a little bit wider, so they have a higher quality Dunlop tyre than the standard Yokohamas you find on the regular Z. The car looks like it's sitting lower for better aero, but in fact it's about the same ride height. Now moving around to the back, there's a new bumper with a different diffuser for better aero and a 3-piece spoiler to also help airflow over the car. But essentially it's the regular Z. And by the way, if you're a fan of 80s concept cars like me, I can really see the Nissan GT4 concept car from the late 80s, which was just one of my favorites, and it's such a shame that Nissan didn't productionize it. Anyway, inside there are more changes as well. Okay, so you know how the exterior is a greatest hits compilation of new and old Z? Well, the same applies inside. Sitting in these really snug Recaro bucket seats, you're aware that you're looking at a time capsule in terms of having the trio of dials on top of the dash, and that's been around since the very first 240Z in 1969. There's a manual handbrake. How retro is that? This 3-spoke steering wheel recalls classic sports cars from the 60s in my mind. And then there's the silhouette, which you can see from the way the window line kind of meets up around the back and the sloping roof line. Those things to me speak of retro design that's visible from within the driver's seat. And I think that's a good thing, because that's part of the reason why you buy a Nissan Z. But Nissan has also thought of modernity and practical things, because you get an 8-inch touchscreen here which has wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's a digital instrumentation cluster that gives you a selection of 3 different screens depending on your mood and which driving mode you're in. The steering wheel adjusts for reach and height, which is not always the case in sports cars, I've got to say. And the practicalities exist, like cup holders, you get 2 of them, one underneath the center console. There's just enough room for this bottle to fit in the door, and the quality is there. The build quality is as you'd expect from a Japanese manufacturer. So that's all good. Great driving position, although I've got to say that the seat, the manual adjustment for the driver's seat is a little bit weird, because it doesn't have a latch that rises up and down. Instead, you've got to twirl a couple of knobs, and that adjusts the angles individually, which I haven't seen in a new car since about 2003, which, by the way, was when the 350Z was released, and that is the car that lurks underneath this car ultimately. Anyway, it's a 2-seater. There's certainly enough room. There's a surprising amount of space just behind the seats for you to store stuff. But my favorite thing about the Z is the frameless doors. Like, I love a sports coupe with frameless doors. It just makes getting in and out a little bit easier. Anyway, let's check out the boot in the back. And of course, as with the 350Z and 370Z, there is a bar bisecting the front and the rear, as well as a wide, if shallow, luggage area underneath this hatchback, which adds a degree of practicality for all those weekends away you want to make in the Nissan Z, because driving this car is what this car is all about. Anyway, let's check out what's under the bonnet. Nissan really knows how to make V6 engines, and the VR30 DD is no exception. It produces quite a lot of power and a decent watt of torque, and it's really one of the best things about any Z. The difference is Nismo has made it 4% more powerful and around 10% torquier than before. Power jumps 11 kilowatts and torque a handier 45 newton meters, providing extra punch as well as slightly superior power to weight ratio of around 184 kilowatts per tonne. And that's despite the Nismo gaining around 50 kilos. This has been made possible thanks to extra turbo boost, revised ignition timing, improved cooling systems, and updated engine management software. Driving the rear wheels is a Mercedes-Benz based 9-speed torque converter auto. Upgraded and retuned for track use, it includes a Sport Plus mode providing speedier shift responses. Aided by the new launch control function, we managed a tidy 4.5 seconds to 100. Sadly though, there's no manual option as per the regular Z. Underneath, the platform might date all the way back to the 350Z of 2003, but Nismo has really worked some magic. Along with the retuned dampers, everything else has been stiffened up, including the anti-roll bars, springs, bushes, and even the steering rack mounts, to help deliver more controlled and linear steering. There's extra underfloor bracing at the front, centre and rear of the car, thicker brake rotors, and model-specific Dunlop SP Sportmax GT600 tyres that are wider at the back, on gloss black Rays alloys. Continuing to use a double wishbone front and multi-link rear suspension setup, the Z's front-to-rear weight distribution is 56 to 44. The Nismo was our favourite version of the previous 370Z by some margin. How does it square up in the RZ34, guys? Keep watching. Earlier I said that the Ford Mustang is one of this car's main targets. And you know, there's a little bit of American muscle car in the way that the Zs have always driven. And the Nismo is no exception. With 520 newton meters of torque as well as 309 kilowatts of power, it's got a slightly better power to weight ratio than the regular one. But in reality, with the tuned, faster 9-speed Mercedes supplied automatic transmission, it really goes fast. And I mean, the performance in this is almost sub-supercar in the way it's delivered. There are 3 driving modes: normal, sport and sport plus. And sport plus is unique to the Nismo. And the result is quite startling acceleration. We're talking the rear end just kind of wanting to just break loose. It's that sort of whoosh, and aided by the twin turbos, mid-range acceleration is formidable. I'm talking instant, and that's despite having turbos. Having said that though, the chassis is right up there in terms of dealing with it. Double wishbones up front, a multi-link rear end, a fairly good even weight distribution. It all means that it steers and handles precisely. Having said that, the chassis is certainly up to the task of dealing with all that power and torque. The steering, while not as sharp as say an MX-5's, is certainly responsive enough, and it interacts with the driver. There's great feedback and a fluid way in the way it corners and handles. The body control is excellent. The driver assist systems are quite nuanced, despite the fact there's all that power that's going to the rear wheels, and the suspension is really good. The larger dampers that Nismo fit seem to make a real difference in the way this car rides. So it's comfortable. I mean, it's a little firm, but it's certainly not to the point where you are, you're feeling any kind of discomfort. And the brake upgrade that the Z Nismo receives is certainly up to the task of bringing this to a halt. In fact, the entire dynamic signature of the Z is tuned for it to be a tauter and more involving drive. About the only thing that you might notice and dislike about this car from a dynamic perspective is that there is quite a bit of road noise that comes through, particularly on the open road, and that has to do with the fact that you've got a large hatch, like vast space behind you that acts as a bit of a barrel in terms of noise transmission. But other than that, it makes the right sounds, particularly when you put it in the Sport and Sport Plus modes. It kind of sizzles and bops and does that kind of farty sound. It's really, really enjoyable to drive. So in summary, I would say that yes, you do pay an extra 20 grand for the Nismo performance upgrade, but you certainly feel it on the road. This does exactly what it says on the tin, and I think it's worth the money. So much for performance. In terms of economy, this thing uses half a litre more than the regular Z due to the extra muscle that it's received. Plus, it requires expensive 98 premium unleaded petrol. So economy might be low, but safety is pretty high because Nissan does fit a raft of driver assist safety systems like AEB, blind spot monitoring, that sort of thing. You can check my full review at carsguide.com.au to find out more. Just keep in mind that there's no actual crash test rating for the Z, while the ISOFIX that's standard in the regular car isn't in the Nismo version because of these Recaro sport seats. Like all Zs, the Nismo is subject to a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty with service intervals fixed at every 12 months or 10,000 kilometres. There's also 5 years of roadside assistance. Finally, Nissan provides prepaid maintenance plans that can save up to $250 over 3 years, as well as cap price servicing. At the time of publishing, no figures were available for the Nismo per se, but for the regular Z, they're between $350 and $800 per service, depending on the age and mileage of the vehicle. So, should you spend an extra 20k on the Nismo version of the fabulous Z? Well, given how much we love the standard car, the answer should be no. But Nismo's modifications has just made this a sharper and more enjoyable drive than the standard version. So, yes, you should. You can read the full review at carsguide.com.au, and as always, thanks for watching.